think of last year, you were talking about hornets, and there's news about the killer hornets are coming at us. And there's just always something to fear, right? There's always something they want us to be afraid of. And there's always a boogeyman. There's always a country on the edge of nuclear war. There's always communists taking over. There's always, whatever they try to throw at us. But when we focus on Yahuwah and his word and his son and just everything that he provides us with, and put all that, all those Elohim Akrim out of our heads, out of our thoughts, we have peace. That perfect peace that passes understanding when we meditate on his word.
So when they tell us the killer hornets are in town, we might say, thank you, Yahweh, you're going to drive out our enemies, just like you said. And we could take confidence that, hey, these guys are on our side. It's like we've talked about before, Isaiah 13. The staging of that is go up onto the mountaintop, wave a banner, get their attention, and guide them, like a traffic cop, like somebody at the airport, guiding in the airplane to the houses of the nobles and saying, right over here, this direction. They come from the far side of the heavens, is what it says. And they're coming to eat people, is what it seems to say. And it's like, oh man, are these like space aliens? Are these like interdimensional beings that are, oh no, all us earthlings are in big trouble. Then you read a little further and it says, oh no, these are Yahweh's Delta Force, his SWAT team. These are Yahweh's proudly exulting ones who are exuberant over his grandeur, is the way one translation reads. Yahuwah's agents, proudly exulting over his grandeur. They're not doing this because they're pirates looking for their own loot. They're coming on a mission from Yahuwah. So you read Isaiah 13, if we see something like Nibiru or whatever it might be that we think is coming into our neighborhood, the reason it's called Nibiru is because it's the word neighbor, Hebrew. It's like, oh, we should take hope. In other words, every time we see mass confusion coming to our enemies, it's like, oh, thank you, Yahweh, just like you said. When we see the 10 plagues arriving, like what he did to Egypt, oh, thank you, Yahweh, just like you said. Everything that happens, it's like, oh, here comes the devil. Oh, thank you, Yahweh, just like you said. It's all how we choose to take it. So we could read other things. I would encourage you to read Deuteronomy 8, 9, 10, this area, because it's just great promises. It's great perspective. We'll read a few more. Hear, O Israel. That's the word Shema Israel. Beginning of chapter 9. Today you cross the Jordan. So here's Moshe standing in Israel, and he's giving you might say the last speech before. In fact, this whole book of Deuteronomy is kind of like, this is what it seems to read as if this whole book of Deuteronomy is the speech Moshe gave that day that they were going to cross the Jordan. And then, but Moshe wasn't allowed to cross the Jordan. And so he's walks up to the mountain and has died, and Yahuwah hid his body so that nobody could take his bones and turn him into some great relic. But so this reading the book of Deuteronomy, think about this. It's like, this is the last great speech of the most greatest leader that Israel had. And he was telling him, I'm going to reiterate, this is the blessing, this is the curse, this is what you're supposed to do. And this is the upshot, the ramifications of the whole thing. So anyway,
Remember,
we're going to come and drive out the nations that are greater and mightier than you, cities that are great and fortified up to the heavens, a great and lofty people, children of giants that you knew and whom you have heard. Who can stand up against the children of the giant? But you know today that Yahweh, your Elohim, he crosses before you, a consuming fire. He will destroy them. He will subjugate them before you. You will drive them out and cause them to perish quickly, as Yahweh spoke to you. Do not say in your heart, when Yahweh pushes them away from before you, saying, because of my righteousness did Yahweh bring me to possess this land. And it is because of the wickedness but it was because of the wickedness. It's just the letter Vav. So Yahweh is saying, listen, this is the way it works. This is the mishpat. Don't think that you're so good and that's why it happens. But when you do wickedness, you will perish just as certainly as they did. It was because of the wickedness of the nations did Yahweh drive them away from before you. Again, reiterating verse 5, not because of your righteousness and the uprightness of your heart are you coming to possess land, but because of the wickedness of these nations does Yahweh your Elohim drive them away from before you. And in order to establish the word that he swore to your forefathers, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, and you should know that not because of your righteousness, the third time he says it, does Yahweh give you this good land to possess it, for you are a stiff-necked people. Remember, do not forget that you provoked Yahweh your Elohim in the wilderness. From the day you left Egypt to your arrival at this place, you have been rebels against Yahweh. At Horeb you provoked it. He goes on and on and on. It's like, okay, listen. What do we do with this? We are not such good, great people that Yahweh should regard us. But if we stop doing wickedness, there's another couple times where Yahweh says, if the wicked man stops doing wickedness and starts doing righteousness and kindness and good, none of his wickedness will be recalled. Think about that. This is in the Old Testament. There's no mention of Jesus dying on the cross, of there being a Savior. No mention. But Yahweh says at least 3 different places that I've found, he says that when the wicked man stops doing wickedness and does righteous things, none of his wickedness will be remembered. When he has a change of heart. Why? Now I can project that in his timeline of existence, there is no past, present, future. It's all the same. It's all now. And so because Yeshua, I could say, according to the alphabetic pattern, Hey Vav Zion, Ket Tet Yod, and then boom, he's going to resurrect at Zadi. The point is, because of that crucifixion, resurrection, however that worked out in terms of the balancing of scales, Ezekiel 18:21 is one place that says it. There's also a couple more. Because of that, then legally a way of forgiveness was built into the system. And when Yeshua came and did it 2,000 years ago at this point, that you might say kicked in a certain contingency factor for the entire scope of the human race. That's another debatable matter that we could get into sometime if anybody wants to. But what I'm saying is I'm not going to argue whether the death of Yeshua was a sacrifice for the remission of our sins, because that's the meaning of the word spelled het, tet, yod. And because I can find it in those 3 alphabetic sequence letters, het, tet, yod, okay, I'm good with that. You know, whether it's Christian doctrine that the Jews don't believe, or, you know, whether the blood of bulls and goats could have ever taken away anybody's sin. The Passover lamb was not a sin sacrifice. You know, things get murky. But the point is, Yahweh said that when a wicked man stops doing wickedness and starts doing righteousness, turns his way to doing goodness and kindness, that his wickedness will not be remembered. Okay, we have to count on that. Thank you, Yahuwah. So in chapter 9, verse 13, Yahweh goes on to say, or Moshe is saying, Yahweh said to me, I've seen this people. It's a stiff-necked people. That's it. I'm done with them. Release me. What does that mean? Why would Yahweh say to Moshe, release me and I shall destroy them and erase their name from under the heavens? And I will make you, Yahweh speaking to Moshe, I will make you a mightier, more numerous nation than they. So Yahweh's saying to Moshe, these sons of Abraham are all fouled up. So guess what, Moshe? You're going to be the great grandpappy of the Israelites. I'll make you the great father out of your lineage, your loins. You will be I'm just going to kill off the entire family. Release me. Release me. Is Yahweh bound to anyone? Apparently so. Apparently Yahweh is bound by his words of vow to us. I'm not going to release him from his words. He promised to bless us if we walked in his ways. So I'm going to walk in his ways and get blessed. He said he'd forgive me if I turned from my wicked ways and had a heart for his word. If I listened to his voice, he said he would listen to my voice. Okay, I'm not going to release him from that contract. All right, thank you. Moshe in verse 19 says, I was terrified of the wrath and blazing anger with which Yahweh had been provoked against you to destroy you. Moshe was right there, as it were, face to face, though other places we see no one has ever seen the face of Elohim. Other people claim to have seen his face, and it's like, okay, that's another matter we won't get into. But Moshe beheld a fearful, terrible attitude in Yahweh. Can you imagine seeing the face of your own father that angry at you, so hating you at that moment that he just wants to rip you to pieces? I know of people that I've talked to that saw their father in that mind. What a horrible thing. Verse 20, Yahweh became very angry with Aaron to destroy him. So I prayed also for Aaron at that time. Yahweh was so mad at what Aaron did in making that golden calf that he didn't have a speck of love, a speck of regard, a speck of anything left for Aaron. He was so at the edge. To contemplate for a moment that's what our great leaders have led us into, that place where Yahweh just wants to destroy us all, just get rid of every one of us. But Moshe somehow intervened. But yet Moshe himself got in big trouble for having an attitude. You go down to verse 23. But you rebelled against the word of Yahweh your Elohim. You did not believe him. You didn't shema his call, hearken to his voice. You've been rebels against Yahweh from the day that I knew you. This is Moshe talking to our forefathers. But my point in reading all this is to say, because this effort of studying his word, of learning his language and reading these verses is so that we are not of that same ilk, of that same type. Hopefully that we are not provoking the ire of our dear beloved Heavenly Father's face that caused him to flare his nostrils in disgust. But he says right here, believe him and listen to his voice. Believe him. Believe him. There's something about hope, which is not just a vain imagination that you're hoping, as we talked before, but the hope is the trust that what he said he will do. Okay, just believe him. Simple as that. He said it. Okay, we're going to believe it. Yeah, but it doesn't matter about the yabbats. Yeah, but what about that guy got sick? What about this prime minister said such and such, or the president said that, or the senator, or the billionaire computer programmer said it doesn't matter. Yahweh said this. I'm only going to listen to the words of Yahuwah because I know how much those other guys have lied. But it's not just knowing that they've lied, because I've heard their voice, but don't hearken to his voice. I've heard their voices, but to hearken, even though it's still the word Shema, it's to take it to heart. Deuteronomy 9:27. Remember, for the sake of your servants, for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, do not turn to the stubbornness of this people. That word turn is it's peinun, where we get the word face. It means to don't. So Moshe is pleading with Yahweh and saying, please, please, the last words out of my mouth before I die, the last prayer of Moshe, Yahweh, our Elohim, our Father in heaven, remember your words. Don't hold us accountable for our words, please, but remember your own words. You will forgive. You will fulfill the promise you gave to our forefathers. In verse 29, they are your people and your heritage, whom you took out with your great strength and your outstretched arm. Yahweh's got this whole history of the planet is what it is because Yahweh made a promise to three men, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and then to Moshe, and then to the people of Israel, and then it reiterated through David and Yeshua, but Yahweh has got himself strung out where he can't break this promise. And if we are foolish enough to think that he changed the rules and did away with it, like they said in the book 1984, then we are the damned. Take him at his word. Now we get into chapter 10, verse 2. I shall inscribe on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets that you smashed, and you will place them in the ark. We could just take that and say, okay, listen, we were told for the last 2,000 years that the words were nailed to the cross, that the words were smashed, that the words that Yahweh said are no longer valid, but they are valid, and Yahuwah will sustain them. So this whole idea, verse 4, he inscribed on the tablets according to the first script. That would be Paleo-Hebrew. There's something about the ancient Paleo-Hebrew, which is the words Yahuwah wrote with his own finger, and the same word for finger is also the word for paint, color, and dye. So we have, like on the cards, on the array, on the petroglyph suit, each letter is in a color. It looked like it was engraved in the stone with a finger. That's what's behind that graphic. And then here we're going to look at real quick at that time, verse 8, Deuteronomy 10, verse 8. At that time, Yahuwah set apart the tribe of Levi. Now, this is what the tribe of Levi is supposed to do: carry the ark of the covenant of Yahweh. Okay, to sustain the regard, the maintenance of the covenant is the job of the Levi. For us to simply sustain the regard of the covenant, what we're talking about right now, is the job of Levi and the job of all of Israel, but Levi was the preeminent tribe. That was their actual obligation. Number 2, to stand before Yahuwah, to minister to him. How does somebody minister to him? So if you look at the Hebrew words, it says to carry is lamed shin aleph tav. So shin aleph is the word for lift up. It's shin vav aleph is to make something vain or void. Nun shin is to, or nun shin aleph, you have the word nasa, which means to pick up and carry. So again, if you're looking at the Hebrew words, it's to lift up. Aleph tav is another way to read that. Et ha aleph resh vav nun. That's Aaron. That's the word actually for the ark. Brit Yahweh la amad is the word stand. We talked about the word amad, ayin mem dalet, and bet. What is it? Bet shin lamed was the word which is to endure. Lifnei Yahweh, to shamar, to minister. Well, see, here's the word is excuse me, not shamar. It's shin resh tav. To shin resh tav is to minister to him. Well, that word sar, remember, was also prince, poet, bracelet chain. It's the root of the word for Sarah. Minister. How do you minister to Yahweh? It doesn't say that. To minister to him. It doesn't say that. It says lifnei Yahweh, lamad lifnei Yahweh, to stand in the presence of Yahweh, or to make the face of Yahweh stable and enduring. What we're doing is right now in having these particular talks each week is we are, you might say, stabilizing the enduring regard of the panay of Yahweh, which is not just face or countenance, but it's what comes out of his mouth. That's noon coming out of pay, but it's also the disposition of everything these words are talking about is his face, is his composure. The fact that he gave us his covenant that endures forever is his face. To shin resh tav vav is to shin resh it. To shin resh is to patronize it, to, as it were, put it into a poetry, a song, a bracelet chain, making it available and accessible and beautiful, and unto bet resh kaf, unto the blessing of his name, bashemo, under the blessing of where he's at. The word Shem is name, fame, renown, reputation, but it also means here or there or where something's at. So you could say, well, where is the blessing? Where is the blessing to be found? He put before us a blessing and a curse. And the question is, oh, we know how to get the curse. We've done that for the last 2,000 and 3,000 years. But how do we get the blessing? Because his face is fixed in a certain angle, we could say. And he's looking at where the blessing is going to be. And as long as we're over here and over there, we're not going to get the blessing. We're going to get the curse. But if we want to get the blessing, we move ourselves and stand right in front of where he's looking. And that's where the blessing is to be found. So we could say that if we want to, what the tribe of Levi was to do was not just carry the ark, stand in front of him to minister to him as if he needs to be ministered to, and to bless in his name. How do you bless in his name? Well, you say, oh, bless you in the name of Yahweh, or God bless you. Is that how to get the blessing? The way to get the blessing is to stand right in the front of where he looks, because he said he'll put his ear to the one who listens to him. He'll put his eyes upon those who look to his ways, those who walk, or those who choose to walk in his ways. And then David says, your word is a light to my path, a lamp to my feet. And I'm going to walk on your path, because that's the path of blessing. It's not just a matter of calling on the name of some God to come and please pour out a blessing on some random indiscriminate people who refuse to listen to him. That's not the way we get our blessing. And if the tribe of Levi ever made us think that, then shame on them. The last phrase, until this day, Moshe was basically saying, look, at even now, when Moshe is speaking to him, the tribe of Levi is still about that business. Ed hayom hazah, I endow it. That's the word for witness, or to testify, or to, the root of the word moed is to gather an appointment as this day. In other words, you could say continually, you will see the evidence that this is still true, that this still is a sustained power and effect. The word hazah, hey, zayin, hey, means the this, or the designated distinction. Hey, zayin, hey. If let's go down to verse 12. This is Deuteronomy 10. Now, okay, he brings it back to present frame of mind. You know, Moshe's floating between remembering the past, looking towards the future. You know, where are we at today? What are we doing? And so again, let's bring this present tense. Now, O Israel. Oh, wait a minute. Let me real quick look at Ezekiel 44, 23 and 24. Ezekiel 44, 23. This also is another statement of the Levites. They shall instruct my people according or concerning the difference between the kadosh and the halal, which is to say the holy and the ordinary. And they shall inform them of the difference between contaminated and clean. Concerning a disagreement, they shall stand in judgment and shall educate them accordingly to my laws. And they shall safeguard my teachings and my decrees regarding all my appointed times, and they shall sanctify my Sabbaths. That's the job of a Levite. Instruct my people about the difference between the Shabbat and the other 6 days, the difference between the Moedim and any other holiday, the difference between food that shall be eaten and not eaten. My teachings, my decrees, if you look up those words, it's Torah, it's Chok, it's Moedi. My Sabbaths and appointed times is the Moedim, and to guard is the word Shabbat, and it's to make them sacred or Kadosh, Kuf Dalet Shin. That's everything we are talking about here. What I'm saying is that, can you get that kind of instruction at your local gathering hole, wherever that is, whether it's a church or a school or a pub or a clubhouse, a clan meeting? Can you get that instruction? And if not, then you need to decide for yourself what those things are. Yahweh has set apart the tribe of Levi in order to sustain the truth being voiced on the face of the earth. You look at Ezekiel, again, chapter 44, verse 28. In parentheses, it says, the priesthood will be a heritage for them. I am their heritage. Don't give them a possession in the land of Israel. I'm their possession. He's basically saying, listen, the Levites should be so about the truth and Yahuwah's business that they're not accumulating wealth for themselves, setting their, you might say, their efforts towards lands and properties and titles and goods and gadgets. There's something about Yahweh will be the heritage of those who promote his words. And that's sufficient. That's not just sufficient, it's shavah, pressed down, shaken together, and overflowing. Verse 12 of Deuteronomy 10. Now, Israel, what does Yahweh your Elohim ask of you? Okay, what he asked of the Levites is one thing. What he's now asking of us normal people, only this, to fear Yahweh your Elohim. Okay, that's having a regard of, like we said before, to fear Yahuwah means we're not going to fear the devil. We're not going to fear Goliath. We're not going to fear the Nephilim and Rephaim and Anakim. We're not going to fear the giants. We're not going to fear the reptilians and the Illuminati and the Chinese and the Ruskies and the Americans and the Brits and the French and the Germans and the Spanish and whoever else we're taught to hate and fear. Fear Yahweh your Elohim. You could say to go, or you could say this is made evident by going laka in all his ways and loving him and serving him. Yahuwah, your Elohim, with all your heart and all your soul. This isn't a list of a bunch of different things that we should do. This is all the same thing. This is what it means to fear or have a regard of, because the word Yod Resh Aleph, which is translated fear, Yod is the prefix, and if you look at Resh Aleph Hey in the dictionary, it means to be allowed to see, or to put on exhibition, or to be understood, or to perceive. It's like to finally get it, to finally get a glimpse of who is Yahweh? What did he say? That's what's in these 22 letters. The idea of studying the Hebrew is not just to learn some foreign language or, oh, yeah, now I know how to read the Bible in the ancient script. It's like, well, so what? Well, the so what is, it's so that we have an exhibition, a resh aleph hey, of who the Elohim of Israel is. And the idea of saying, listen, the Hebrew letters are correlated to the Moedim. That's the Mishkan pattern. I have never heard any other teacher ever in my life ever even bring that subject up. But by saying that means that if the alphabet is Yahweh's first person present tense declaration manifest of himself, that being the Aleph, that he iterated Aleph Bet, which is John 1:1, means that because it's correlated to the Moedim, then the 7 Moedim and the day of Shabbat, as described in Leviticus 23, is his self-expression, that we should have an observation of, a comprehension of, and a fearful regard of. And for the Christian church at large, over 2,000 years of a billion permutations, that they still to this day have no regard of his Moedim and his Yom, his Shabbat, is a clue that they're not having Yerah of the Resh Aleph Hey of Yod Hey Vav Hey. And that's not my attitude. That's what's in these words. And when he says, verse 16, you shall cut away the barrier of your heart and no longer stiffen your neck. Who's he talking to? Cut away the barrier of your heart is a picture of circumcision. Let me go back. Now, O Israel, what does Yahweh your Elohim ask of you? Only to fear Yahweh your Elohim, to go in his ways and to love him, and to serve Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and all your soul. That means even if you have to learn his words, just learn a few of his words, any of his words. Is that really a manifest of all your heart and all your soul? To observe the commandments of Yahweh and his decrees, which I command you today. That's Moshe speaking in Deuteronomy 10, 1500 BC approximately, for your benefit. Well, there's the balancing of scales of the Mishpat, because he gave us a bunch of things to do, so that if we want to get his blessing, we don't say, God bless you. What we do is we do what he said. And if you don't know what he said, it's the Levites' job to make it clear, what did he say, so we can do it, so we can get his blessing for our benefit. Verse 14, behold, to Yahweh your Elohim are the heaven and the highest heaven, the earth and everything that is in it. Well, what about the devil? I thought Adam gave the earth to the devil. Well, gee, I guess Moshe failed to get the memo. Verse 15, only your forefathers did Yahweh cherish to love them, and he chose their offspring after them. That's you. From among all the peoples as this day, you shall cut away the barrier of your heart and no longer stiffen your neck. For Yahweh your Elohim, he is the God of the powers. That's the word Allah. The God of the powers. Elohim of El, and the Lord of lords, Adonai, Adonim, the great, the mighty, the awesome Elohim, who does not show favor, does not accept a bribe, doesn't show favor. I thought he showed favor to David and Moshe and Abraham and Daniel. What this means is that he's not going to be swayed by whoever you are. When Moshe betrayed the relationship, Moshe wasn't allowed to enter the land. When Aaron betrayed, and Nadab and Abihu betrayed the calling to the priesthood, they weren't allowed to continue. Walk in his ways and get the blessing. That's it. Quit doing wickedness. Start doing righteousness, and none of your wickedness will be remembered. Verse 18, he carries out the judgment. That would be mishpat. Asha mishpat. He carries out the judgment of orphans and widow and loves the proselyte, gives him bread and garment. Does Yahweh have a heart for the orphan and widow? If you read what David said, Yahweh made them orphans and widows by killing off their fathers and husbands. Why would he do that? Because their fathers and husbands were the soldiers of the enemy, were big stupid jerks. Who's the widows and the orphans? Was this widows and orphans of Israel? Or there's a concept that he's talking about here. You'd have to get into the concept of what he's saying. You shall love the proselyte because you were strangers, or proselytes, the same word, gar, gimel resh, in the land of Egypt. Verse 20, Yahweh your Elohim shall you fear, him shall you serve, to him shall you cleave, and in his name shall you swear. And it is not to say when you hit your finger, you should say, God damn it. That's not what he's saying there. Because his name isn't God. It means when you give a vow and you say, as Yahweh is my witness, you better be sure you're not lying. If you're lying, you will bring all hell upon your head. It used to be in the days of when people believed this, that you put your hand on a Bible and you took an oath in court. You put your hand on the Bible and took an oath, and then they would believe your words because they knew that you had a fear that if you were lying, that you'd get all hell back on your head. Well, nowadays, nobody believes in hell, nobody believes in God, nobody believes in the Bible, and nobody believes in swearing an oath, and so it's all foo-foo, woo-woo, woof-woof. Yeah, but Yahweh maintains the covenant. And if we're his people and we invoke his name, we better be doing kindness and truth and justice. Because if not, we've got hell to pay for that. We're called to be a people of truth and kindness and justice. Verse 21 of Deuteronomy 10, he is your praise, he is your Elohim, who did for you these great and awesome things that your eyes saw. With 70 souls did your ancestors descend to Egypt, but now Yahweh your Elohim has made you like the stars of heaven for abundance. There's a few other things to look into here, a few other verses. That's Deuteronomy 10. Let's read a couple more. Beginning of verse 11, you shall love Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall safeguard his charge. What is that? You will shamar what he said to shamar. That's literally vav shin mem resh tav mem shin mem resh tav vav. In other words, safeguard his charge. That's English, but shamar that he said, what he said the thing was to shamar. It's the same word. Quite often he'll say shema what I said to shema. His decrees, that's the word chok, het kuf. Het vav kuf is a rung of the ladder. Het is a fence, kuf is like the dome over the top, so it's like the treasure box. Another way to see it, but if it's decrees, it's also constitution. It's also sometimes just translated law. His ordinances, that's the word mishpat, but again, the word mishpat is balancing scales, and he says, whatever you do is going to come back around. You can say, oh, ordinances, that's law. It's like traffic cops or, meter maids, giving you $50 tickets for missing 30 seconds of your meter. It's not that kind of an ordinance. What he said is everything you do is going to come back on you multiplied. That's his mishpatim. What a man intends to do to another is going to come back on him. So you better intend mercy so you get mercy upon yourself multiplied. And then the word commandment is mitzvot, mem zadi vav tav. Zadi vav is the root of the word for zion, zadi yod vav nun, which is one who's doing as commanded. Oh, well, he changed his commandments. He did away with them all. There is no command except to love. That's just not true. But if it's true for you, you can have your own religion, your own denomination. You can believe whatever you want to believe. But according to this truth, his commandments are sustained. What did he say? Oh, here, kol ha'imim, all the days. All the days is mitzvot, his mishpat, and his chok, and we're supposed to shamar what he said to shamar. That's basically the bottom line of the whole thing. Verse 8, so you shall observe the entire commandment that I command you today, so that, here's an if-then equation, you observe these commandments, the chok that I tell you, or the mitzvot, shamar, the mitzvot and the chok that I command you today, so that you will be strong. That's the word chazak. And you will come to the land to possess what you're crossing. See, every single time you read the story, it's always if-then conditions. If we don't listen to him, we get whooped and we fail and we shrivel up and we get turned into slaves. If we do listen to him, everything that he said happens because it's a chemical reaction, as it were. Verse 18, you shall place these words of mine upon your heart and upon your soul, bind them for a sign on your arm, and let them be an ornament between your eyes. You shall teach them diligently to your children. That's why we're doing this right here. To discuss them while you sit in your home, while you walk on the way. There's the picture of the letter bet. The inner and then the opening up, the unfurling, the tight curl that opens up, like the Fibonacci sequence thing. You shall have them on your heart. You will open up and teach them to your children and discuss them. Sit in your home, that's inside, and when you walk on the way. When you retire, that's when you go to sleep and your eyes close and you go back into your own mind. And when you rise up, the unfurling. And you shall write them on the doorposts of your house, that's your personal space, and upon your gates, that's opening up into the community social space. In order to, see, this is the blessing that comes when you do this. You will prolong your days, the days of your children upon the land that Yahweh swore to your fathers to give them, like the days of the heaven over the earth. For if, verse 22, Deuteronomy 11, you will observe this entire commandment that I command you to perform it, to love Yahweh your Elohim, walk in his ways, to cleave to him. Love him, walk in his ways, and cleave to him. Oh, and bind the devil. It's not about binding the devil. That's never what he says. Verse 23, Yahweh will drive out these nations from before you, and you will drive out greater and mightier nations than yourselves. Every place where the sole of your foot will tread will be yours. From the wilderness and the Lebanon, from the river, the Euphrates to the western sea, shall your boundary. No man will stand up against you. Yahweh your Elohim will set your terror and fear on the entire face of the earth where you tread, as he said to you. Now, either you're going to believe these words or you're not. And if you don't believe these words, you can make up any new covenant you want. See, I present before you today a blessing and a curse. A blessing that you listen, you hearken to the commandments of Yahuwah your Elohim, I command you today. And the curse, if you do not hearken to the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim, and you stray from the path I command you today to follow Elohim Achrim, gods of others that you did not know. And I'll just say this, and we'll open up to you guys here. The blessing when you listen, and the curse if you're not listening, if you don't listen, if they lied to you and you never knew this to be true. The curse comes automatically when you don't listen. The blessing has to be proactively seized and grabbed a hold of by listening to the Kol Yahuwah. Listen, take it to heart, believe it, and act upon it. Act upon what Yahweh said to our forefathers in this language. In verse 32, you will be careful to perform all the decrees and the ordinances that I present before you today, and our enemies will be terrified and drop from their position in fear and terror. And then you go on to Zechariah chapter 2, where he's going to send 4 carpenters, 4 craftsmen, 4 mimes, and it's going to terrify the horns of the nations who were taking advantage of the interim occasion of the 2,730-year curse, where Yahweh turned his back on his people and wouldn't listen to them because we wouldn't listen to him. And he set up overlords to people to ravage and take advantage of his people for the entire duration of while his face was turned away from his people, because his people's face was turned away from him. And the way to get the blessing back is to run over and stand right in his line of sight where he's looking, which is at his words. And when we go and stand in front of his face and say, here we are, Abba, we're listening. We're sitting down on Shabbat. Return your favor. Deal with our enemies. We could go on, but let's go on to you guys. You guys, then I'll bring out one other point, which is looking at a couple. The thing I'll bring up after we open up to you all is that somebody said, where does it say that Yahweh will return his people to his land? And just so you know, Hosea and Ezekiel, Hosea 2, 5, and 8, we'll look at a couple verses, Ezekiel 34, 36, 37, 39. Anyway, go ahead. If you guys, I'll give you a chance to throw anything in you guys want to talk about.
Just thankful to be here and to hear you preach that way. I wanted to know what the word remember is in verse 8, verse 2, remember.
That would be the word zakar, Zion Kaf Resh is the word remember.
So,
It means much more than just,
Zion
it means to speak and act on behalf of. And the word does not just mean more than just remember. It means to speak and act on behalf of. So when he says, remember my word, it means speak and act on behalf of. Remember my name, speak and act on behalf of it. That's what he's telling us.
It's a covenant.
More enthusiasm in your talk there, Eric.
It's a covenant. It's a covenant word, isn't it? Remember is a covenant word.
Absolutely.
Remembrance means it's covenant for us. Remember the way. To remember, it's such a covenant word that when we're going into the future, we're looking back at the covenant and we got a firm foundation to stand on, and acquiesce to walk.
Remembering is a key part. Remembering is a critical aspect of being his people, apparently.
I can tell you that my father died of Alzheimer's when he was 66 or 67. And the biggest joy that he had when he first started getting this is, and the dread that he had is sometimes he would remember, and then he was lucid, we could talk to him. And the dread that he had is that he would the next day he would not remember. So the father saying, don't go into the world and have this kind of Alzheimer's and forget where you come from, forget what I've done for you. So again, the people that walk away from the word of the Father, they're walking into Alzheimer type of living. And at the end, my father had no strength. They had to keep him all bundled up in a straitjacket because he got violent with his arms all over the place. So it may not be the best analogy, but it's certainly one that I think applies that what's happening to the rest of the world when they go away from the word of the Father, it's sort of an Alzheimer thing. They're walking into oblivion, which is what my father did when he finally died.
Well, you can kind of see that is the feeling of what's around us collectively here in 2021.
Seeing those letters, seeing the weapon and the pillar of fire and smoke and the resh man.
Well, Zakar is actually cough. Excuse me, the Zakar is, remember, is
it's the cough. Okay. Cool. Cough. Right. Oh, thank you. That's good.
But still, it's the weapon, it's the open hand, and it's the resh man. But go ahead, Paul.
Getting on with it. Yeah, getting on with the job, bro. Waiting for the good stuff, doing the good stuff, doing the good stuff. Turn the world upside down. 4 carpenters, well, there's more not of us here today. We can do this job. We can do this job.
We can.
Amen.
Absolutely. This was not given to our previous generation. This is given to us here and now to do this.
Amen. Yes. Yeah, like no other time.
I was going to say, what a great study. Oh my goodness. And what a great topic. What an amazing study. I'm full of emotion right now. And I just am so thankful. Oh my goodness. I'm emotional with this. This is so good. And if I could try to describe the feeling I have, but it's so amazing and wonderful. And I'm so thankful for this study. So thank you, Eric. Thank you.
It's a beautiful thing to realize that what Yahweh said was true, that he gave us words, that he backs them up, he stands behind every word he ever said. And yet he empowered our enemies to tell us lies, just to test us. That word test, nun samic or mem samic, he says, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you to believe my words. And then I'm going to have other prophets and other teachers and other ministers and other politicians get up and forbid you to believe these words, or to convince you that they're wrong, just to give you the challenge. Okay, that's the game. That's the challenge. I'm going to give you words, and then I'm going to have other people get up and tell you that those words aren't true. So you'll have the opportunity to either believe me volitionally, proactively of your own determination, or not. Okay, thank you. Easy game.
It's amazing.
You know, as you're saying that, while you were teaching, I stepped outside for a second, and an airplane is flying over with a banner talking about getting the vaccination. And it's never been, we were talking before you got on there, it's never been about a virus. It's always been about pushing the vaccine agenda. It's I have never seen such a hardcore push on anything in my entire life. I thought it was bad when they were pushing the high def television signal. Everybody had to get that, or they won't be able to watch television. But this is everywhere you go. It's in your face nonstop. And the people are still believing it's for your good. You're nuts. But you know, the Father's gonna, if he's true to his word, he's gonna turn this thing against them that they're trying to push on us. You know, and that he did tell us that if it were possible to fool even the elect, well, we're not being fooled. Keep trying. It's not gonna work. Our heads on a swivel. We're wide awake. We're paying attention. We're not gonna take your crap. We're not gonna take it.
Good. That was something that I was really worried about, the elect being deceived. And those thoughts were in my mind way before I ever came across Eric or anybody talking about what we're talking about now. It was one of my greatest fears, that having met Jesus in those days, being worried about not making it. And well, Eric, I can only say thank you for what you have done and opened our eyes to all of this. It really is. It's truly amazing. And I tend to agree with you, Kurt, that I don't want to sound arrogant, but if we consider ourselves the elect, I seriously doubt that if we continue on the walk that we are on now, that we will be deceived. I seriously doubt it. I think if we continue on this, we're going to make it. We're going to be there with him. My 10 cents.
That's what the scripture says. If it were possible to fool the elect, which means it's not possible to fool the elect, and the elect are the people that have chosen to believe, follow, and obey the words of the Torah of the Father. So those of us that decide to walk in that, we cannot be deceived. You can see what's happening with the COVID. You can see what's happening with Christianity. You can see what's happening with Judaism, because you're not fooled anymore. They can't pull the wool over your eyes. You're one of the elect.
Hallelujah. Amen, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. And Sally, don't feel alone. I mean, I think all of this is affecting us pretty much the same way. There's no words to describe this influx of truth that we get in. There's no way to describe the emotion that we feel. It's just wonderful. That's all I can say.
Eric, do you have? Are you gonna go on to something else, or do you,
Yeah, let me kind of quickly go on to these. You want to, or do you want to stop?
No, we can go on. I just want to address this Torah for today. I don't know who this guy is, but he says, and you kind of addressed him in the comments, but Paleo Hebrew is a made-up language. Yeshua spoke the same Hebrew as Ezra.
So let me address that real quick. The comment I made to him is, I said, that's right. It's exactly the same language. It's just two different fonts, as it were. That being said, there is another regard of the Paleo. So, for example, when I show that card with the 22 letters and I say the way to read this, oh, okay, what am I doing? In English, if I'm going to read the list of alphabet letters, I'm going to say A, B, C, D, E, F. Why didn't I say phi? E, phi, because the way you say each letter has a consonantal phonetic sound, and then in English, we have the vowel sound of E following A, B, C, D, E. That's what I'm saying. Phi, G. So in other words, there's a few that I, J, K, L, M, N, P. See, so what I'm saying is that's just the way the language works. Is you've got a vowel that's not really there following a consonantal sound, a phonetic. So in Hebrew, the consonantal phonetic are the letters by name. Aleph is actually silent, then you got b, bet. So how would you pronounce just the letter bet? Ba. How about the gimel? Ga. How about the dalet? Da. How about the hey? Ha. How about the wav? Wa. So how would you say the alphabetic letters? Abagada havaz achati or kahataya. Anyway, what I'm saying is then there's two ways that you could imagine reading a word. Either you could just read the letter A after every consonantal phonetic. So if you're going to read, say the word gimel is spelled gimel mem lamed. So I could say that was gamala, gamala. Well, that's almost like the word Kamala Harris, the vice president these days in America. That's just reading gimel mem lamed with the ah sound after each letter. Is that the way they did it in the ancient days? Nobody knows. I had heard from some literary, you might say, high acclaimed professional who admitted from a long time ago that nobody really knows how anybody used to speak the language. David or Moshe or Abraham, nobody knows. But in the days of Ezra, now we have vowel points, and Yeshua spoke these same Hebrew words, except if he was speaking Aramaic, they would be different pronunciation because a few things were different, even though they use the same letters. So to think that everything is exactly according to how the Masoretic scribes say, or how we think Ezra spoke or David spoke, the whole thing is conjecture. To say it's all a made-up language, well, English is a made-up language too. So what's your point? It's like nobody really knows how anything was verbalized, but we trust the way it was spelled. And the bottom line of the whole thing, as I have maintained before, is that if you know what the meaning of the 22 letters, that's the whole thing. You know the whole language, you know the whole alphabet, you know the construct of every word and every concept. And one of these things we could do one of these days if you want. I heard somebody talking about the Lord's Prayer, the Tefillah Abenu, the other day, and they were saying, it was on a Catholic radio station actually, they're saying the Our Father prayer is the quintessential expression of relationship between us and Elohim. That's it. When Yeshua gave the Lord's Prayer, that was the quintessential iteration of relationship. Guess what? It matches the Mishkan pattern. You line up the Mishkan pattern to the Lord's Prayer, and it's all right there, which is to say that the epitome of expression is actually the Mishkan pattern. Anyway, so everything else is just bells and whistles. Let me address a couple of these matters. One of the things I was going to say in relationship to the study of Deuteronomy 10 is Deuteronomy 26, verses 16 to 19. This day, this is just another iteration of Yahweh saying the same thing. This day, remember, this is Moshe standing there the last day of his life, basically, before he goes up on the mountain to die. Yahweh your Elohim commands you, when a command is a zadi vav, to perform, that's ayin shin hey, these decrees and these statutes, that'd be chok and mishvat, and you shall observe, that's shema and shomer, and perform, that's ayin shin hey, with all your heart and all your soul. So if we do it begrudgingly, we do it with a casual disregard, we do it like, yeah, well, whatever, look, I'm doing what you said. That's another place where we see that the people were doing the pretense of walking in his ways, but not with all their heart. And so it didn't work, or it betrayed them, or it failed. And so people would say, look, he's a big, stupid monster God who likes to kill people. And there's no reason why we should give him any regard because of whatever reason. But that's because we're not walking and following him with all our heart and all our soul. Verse 17, you have distinguished Yahweh today to be Elohim for you. And what does that mean? To walk in his ways, to observe his decrees and his commandments and his statutes, and hearken to his voice. And if you look at all those words, it's the same words that he keeps using all the time. It's the chok and the mishvat and the mitzvot, and to shema bekol, to listen to his voice. And Yahweh has distinguished you today for him to be a treasured people. That's Am Segula, as he spoke to you, just like he said. See, it's always just like he said. And to observe all his commandments. So for people to say, oh, Yahweh's Elohim, what that means is, I swear a vow to observe his commandments. And if I say, well, the Lord is my God, but I'm not going to observe commandments, that's stupid Old Testament stuff. Wait a minute, it's a different God. It's a different religion. This religion, this Elohim, this relationship. And I've heard many people say it's not, Christianity is not about a religion, it's a relationship. This is the definition of terms of the relationship with Yahuwah. We will observe his commandments as he said, and we will walk in his ways, to Shema, Shomer, and Ashah, his chok, his mitzvot, his mishvat, his edot, his torot, and we will be his treasured people. And, verse 19, he will make us a supreme nation over all the nations that he made for praise, for renown, for splendor. So that, there's an upshot, there's a reason, this is the hope set before us. You will be a kadosh people, an Am Kadosh, to Yahweh, your Elohim, as he spoke. That's the relationship. Am Kadosh, Ayin Mem, Kuf Dalet Shin, La Yahweh, Kadosh La Yahweh, betrothed to Yahweh. 2 Kings 17:33. 2 Kings 17 talks about where the children of Israel, that's where they lost it. That's where Assyria came in and took them over, if you're wondering. Hosea, last king of Israel, 2 Kings 17, read that chapter. That was 721 BC. And then in verse 33, this is where I was talking about a minute ago, they feared Yahweh, but they worshiped their own gods according to the practice of the nations from which they had been exiled. Until this day, they act according to the original practice. They don't fear Yahweh sincerely. They don't act according to the customs and practices or according to the Torah and the commandments that Yahweh commanded the children of Jacob, whose name he changed Israel. The point is here, it is possible to fear Yahweh, but worship other gods also. That won't do. It won't cut it. We don't want to be those people. If you go to, this is Stones to Knock, if you go to page 953, this is the history of the world is all hinged on these matters. So if you look at page 953 in Stones to Knock, this is the title page to the book of Isaiah, right? This is the page before the chapter starts. And what I was going to say here, just briefly, Isaiah was a member of the Judean aristocracy his career as a prophet spanned 86 years, 619 to 533 BC. So when you think Daniel was around 500 BC, he was taken into captivity. Isaiah was before that, so it's around 600 BC. Isaiah's contemporary, Hosea, prophesied to the northern kingdom. At the time, Isaiah prophesied to the kingdom of Judah. So just as a reference, Isaiah primarily spoke to Yehuda just before they were taken into captivity. Hosea, it's telling us right here, was speaking to the northern kingdom. So in the order of the stones to knock here, we have Isaiah, and then Jeremiah, and then Ezekiel, and then we go on to the minor prophets. But if we're going to let's look at a few things in Hosea, because Hosea is specifically talking to the northern kingdom about when the end of all this happens. End of all this, meaning why'd you get thrown into captivity and how do we get back? So if we look at chapter 2, Hosea has supposed to take a wife who was a whore, a prostitute. And she bore children who were supposed to be given names, Lo Ruhama, Lo Ami, and Jezreel. And you look down in verse 8, therefore, behold, I will hedge your way with thorns, hem her in with a fence, and she will not find her paths. That's part of the curse. It looks like a Celtic knot, in my estimation. Another graphic I was working on. In other words, Yahweh says, you will go and you will be lost in a woods of like blackberries, like a hedge of thorns that you cannot get through, just ripping you to pieces until finally one of these days you'll say, I'm just going to find my way back to Yahuwah. That's where we are right now, because he has not brought the 12 tribes back together yet. As of here, we're at the summer solstice of 2021 in another day or so. Behold, I will hedge your way with thorns. So she's going to seek after her paramours, her lovers, thinking they gave her everything. And Yahweh said, it was I who gave you everything. And if you find your lovers of the other cultures, the other religions, they're just going to abuse you and ravage you and throw you into the dump. I will go and return to my first husband. Verse, that's to Yahuwah. Verse, can't read the number here. 19. For she did not realize that it was I who gave her the grain and the wine and the oil. I lavished silver and gold upon her, and they used it for the bow. She didn't realize. What Yahweh is saying here is that the northern 10 tribes, what do you mean they didn't realize? Remember what Yahweh said, if you don't walk in my ways and keep remembering, you're going to forget, and you will never be told. And so as Jeroboam set up the 2 golden calf altars at Christmas and Easter, I mean at Dan and Bethel, they forgot all about the Moedim, forgot all about Yahuwah. They changed his name to Lord God Jesus, and they forgot that there was ever a Yahuwah, Elohim of Israel, who had ever given them all their treasures and all their wealth and all their wisdom and all their prestige in the eyes of their surrounding nations. And he would then kick them out, banish them from the culture, from the land, from the language, and hedge their way with thorns. So that's where we find ourselves today. And verse 12, and now I will reveal her repulsiveness before the eyes of her paramours, and no man will save her from my hand. I will terminate her every rejoicing, her festival, her new moon, her Sabbath, her every appointed season. I will lay waste her vine. This is Yahweh doing it to his own people, not the devil, not the Assyrians and Egyptians and the Babylonians, and the Chinese and the Mexicans and the Brazilians. Gosh, those Brazilians. Just kidding. Everybody loves to hate the Europeans, and I'm just saying, he uses all of us against each other. Verse 15, I will repay her for all the days of the Baalim to which she burns incense. And she adorned herself with her earrings and her jewelry and followed after her paramours, but me she forgot. Nam Yahweh. Well, that's why we have regarded to stop looking at the English language and Christmas and Easter and Sunday. And that's why the curse endured for 2,730 years. If you look at Ezekiel chapter 4 and Leviticus 26. But here we are, verse 16. Therefore, I will seduce her and lead her to the desert. Yahweh's going to seduce Israel and take her to the desert, and I will speak to her heart. Interesting that the word desert is midbar, the place of words, language, alphabet. I will take her to the place of words, and I will speak to her heart. And I will give to her vineyards from there, from these words of the Ivrit, of the ancient language, is where the vineyards will come from. And it'll be as in the days of her youth, on the days for a ascent from the land of Egypt. And it'll be on that day, Nam Yahweh, that you will call me Ishi and no longer call me Baal. Well, the word Baal is translated Lord, and the word Ishi is my man, but it also means my personal possession, private personal possession. But to call me is actually this word kara, which means learn to read. Learn to read my personal possession, and don't just any longer call me Lord. The Christians are the only ones that ever calls him Lord. English. Verse 19, I will remove the names from the Baalim from their mouth and no longer mention again by their name. So why in the LA Baptist High School were we taught the Greek and Roman legends of their gods, but never taught about Yahweh? Well, I'm not going to kick those teachers around because it was under the envelope of the curse back in the 1970s. But here we are, 2021, outside the envelope of the curse. And I'm not going to even think about why waste any time about what people didn't do back then. It had nothing to do with anything. Verse 20, I will seal a covenant for them on that day. On what day? On the day that he seduces his people from the heart, from the language. Seal another covenant for them, reseal the covenant for them. With the beasts of the field and the birds of the heavens and the creeping things of the earth, I will banish bow and sword and warfare from the land. I will lay them down in safety. Hasn't happened yet. I will betroth you to me forever. That word betroth is Aleph, Resh, Shin, Tav. The Aleph meaning I will, the Resh, Shin, Tav is the last three letters of the alphabet. And like I have said a number of times, anytime you see a series of letters that are in the natural sequence order of the alphabet, look at that and realize the message there is embedded in the alphabet. It's the word to betroth. So that promise that I will betroth you to me forever, betroth you to me with righteousness, with justice, with kindness and mercy, and with fidelity, and you will know Yahuwah. If that's the covenant we have with him, it's also the covenant we have with each other. And so we should be treating each other with righteousness, justice, kindness, and mercy, with fidelity, and in the knowledge of Yahuwah. So when we have our preachers and teachers who are anti-Levites and who are not making kadosh the things which he said to make kadosh about what we eat and when we don't work, and just how to regard his words, what'll happen when we do? And it shall be on that day I will respond. That's the word answer, or testify as a witness. Nam Yahweh, ayin nun hey is the word, that you will know Yahweh. And this is the manifest of the reality of our Elohim. I will respond to the heavens, and they will respond to the earth. See, even the heavens and the earth are not subject to global warming or freezing or the atmospheric geoengineering that these guys are trying to mess with. May Yahweh just knock those guys out of the sky. The earth will respond with the grain and the wine and the oil, and they will respond to Jezreel. And I will sow her for myself in the land. Yahweh, maker thus possessor, kana shemayim v'yaretz, will sow us in the land as his people, and nothing that anybody has done or wants to do regarding poisoning the genetics or the land or the water or the air or the seeds has any effect on him, but they will poison each other. Let's look at, that's Hosea 2. Let's look at Hosea 5:15. I will go, I will return to my place until they acknowledge their guilt and seek my face. In their distress, they will seek me, and they will say, come, let us return to Yahuwah, for he has mangled us, and he will heal us. He has smitten, but he will bandage us. He will heal us after 2 days. On the third day, he will raise us up, and we will live before him. Let us know, let us strive to know Yahuwah like the dawn, whose emergence is certain, that he will come to us like the rain that satiates the earth. The proof right there that what we have surrounding us is not the end scenario. It's a temporary status. And here we are, as it were, on the third day, like Yeshua rising out of the grave, Pesach, the pizza of Israel coming out of the dispersion. Let us strive to know Yahuwah. That's what this study of the language is about, striving to know Yahuwah. And then verse 8, verse 12, chapter 8, verse 12. For Ephraim, back up, Ephraim has increased the altars to sin. Ephraim had altars to sin everywhere. See, Ephraim has a tendency to be very religious and spiritually minded, but he can't seem to identify who Yahweh really is. But he had altars all over the place, under every leafy tree, every high hill. I wrote for them the great principles of my Torah, but they were regarded as something alien. Why is it that Ephraim is so spiritually minded, but as soon as you mention the Torah, it's like, oh, but not that. They'll serve any god. They'll make up any god. They'll invent any god. They'll look for woo-woo, New Age, Buddhist, Hindu, Islam, Christian, Jewish. They'll see value in anything. But as soon as it comes down to the chok and the mitzvot of Yahweh, oh, but not that. That's regarded as something alien and strange. Really, really. Well, that's tendency of Ephraim's heart. Ephraim's not such a great thing to be part of until Ephraim returns to Yahuwah. Then the whole world's going to change. Let's look at a couple things in Ezekiel. Ezekiel 34, just a few more here, but just to bring about what Yahweh is going to do. He starts off in 34, woe to the shepherds of Israel who have tended themselves and not the flock. If you look at, starting in verse, say, 21, wait a minute, 34, 10. Thus says Yahweh, behold, I am against the shepherds. I will seek out my flock from their hand. So he's going to pull us out of the church and cause them to cease herding sheep. The shepherds no longer tend themselves. Like I will rescue my sheep from their mouths. They will no longer be food for them. For thus says Yahweh Elohim, behold, I am here, and I will seek out my sheep. I will tend them. I will tend to my sheep and rescue them from all the places they were scattered on the day of cloud and thick cloud. I will remove them from the peoples, gather them from the lands, bring them to their soil, and I will tend them upon the mountains of Israel, in the streams and all the nations' habitations, all the land's habitations. On the mountains of Israel, I care for my sheep. I will lay them down. Nam Yahweh, verse 16. For the lost I will search, the banished I will retrieve, the broken I will bind, the ill I will strengthen, but the fat one and the strong one I will destroy. I will attend them with justice. Okay, then you go to the next verse is 36, Ezekiel 36:6. Prophesy to the land of Israel, say to the mountains, to the hills, to the streams and the valleys, behold, I have spoken in my vengefulness and my wrath, because you have borne the shame of the nations. Therefore, this says Nam Yahweh, I will lift my hand, swearing that the nations surrounding you will bear their shame, but you, O mountains of Israel, will give forth your branch and bear your fruit for my people, for they are soon to come. Just read all of chapter 36 there. The turnaround is at verse 23. Then verse 37:11, talking about the valley of dry bones. He's going to bring his people back, which hasn't happened yet. O bones are dried out and our hope is lost. We are doomed, is what the people of Israel is saying. Behold, I am opening your graves, raising from your graves my people. I'll bring you to the soil of Israel. Then you'll know that I am Yahweh when I open your graves, when I raise you up from your graves, my people. And I will put my spirit in you, and you will come to life, set you on your soul. Then you'll know that I, Yahweh, have spoken, I have fulfilled. One more, Ezekiel 39:21. I will manifest my glory among the nations. All the nations will see my judgment. I have executed my hand that I have placed upon them. Then the house of Israel will know that I am Yahweh their Elohim from that day and onward. So who's the house of Israel? Ephraim, one that were scattered across the nation and gotten into all this idolatry and don't seem to recognize him. They think that the Moedim is a bunch of Jewish stuff. Then the nations will know that because of their iniquity, the house of Israel was exiled 2,730 years. Because they betrayed me, I hid my countenance from them, and I delivered them into the hand of their enemies, and they fell by the sword, all of them. I dealt with them in accordance with their contamination and their sins, and I hid my countenance from them. It's not the devil. It's not that Yahweh's a big, ugly monster, and it's not our enemies. It's Israel's fault for turning away from him. And the way to turn toward him is to read his words, understand his language, hear his voice, and watch over to Shamar the things that he said to Shamar. Therefore, verse 25, thus said Adonai Yahweh, now I will bring back the captivity of Jacob. Hasn't happened yet. And show mercy to the entire house of Israel and be zealous for my Kadosh name. They will bear their shame and all their betrayal that they committed against me. That's a 2,730-year curse. And they will dwell security upon their soil, and none will make them afraid. Well, that hasn't happened yet. When I return them from the peoples and gather them in from the land of their enemies, and I become sanctified through them in the eyes of many nations. For his great name to be sanctified through us, that's Ezekiel 36:23. Then they will know, verse 20, that I am Yahweh their Elohim, for I exiled them to the nations, and I will bring them to their land, and they will not leave any of them there. Then I will not hide my countenance from them again, for I will pour out my spirit upon the house of Israel. Hasn't happened yet. Nam Yahweh. So here's the point. Yahweh said that he banished Israel because of their idolatry and their sin, their lying, stealing, and killing of each other. Sounds like the American way. That's what we do. When we stop doing that and turn to the ways of truth and kindness and righteousness, the word righteousness is also victory, tzedakah. Yahweh will pour upon us his spirit, and it says in Jeremiah that the evidence of his spirit is not that we're going to be speaking in other tongues, but we'll be walking in his ways and loving to do his stuff. That's the manifest evidence of being in his ruach, walking in his ways. So let's just do that. Let's just walk in his ways. Stand in front of his eyeballs, of his gaze, so we can receive his blessing. And what's in front of us is that he will bring us back to the land that he promised our forefathers, and we will endure for many generations with his blessing, and none will make us afraid, because they will be very afraid, because our Elohim, his countenance will be upon us for victory, for health, for wealth, for extreme prosperity, where even nature is completely catered to the benefit of Am Israel, the Am Kadosh of Yahweh. It's a glorious future right in front of us. I think we're right at the threshold of that. Remember, the 10 plagues had to wipe out Egypt, and Egypt was the superpower of the entire earth, as far as we know at that moment. He had to destroy them with the various plagues. So there's a verse, I can't remember where it is, but he said he had to dismantle. He is going to dismantle all the nations where he has us sequestered for all these years. So he's got to dismantle all these, what we would call first and second world nations, in order to drag us back to wherever that land is. If it's on the shore of the Mediterranean, then so be it. That's according to some. Other people think it's elsewhere. But the point is, he will take us back to the heritage that he gave us. He promised our forefathers. That will happen. So none of us should be too invested in any particular lands in the exile at the moment. That's what our future is. Okay, so let's just be about talking amongst ourselves about how to do what he said. That's the upshot of the whole thing. Anyway, back to you all then.
Very, very good, Eric. Very good. I mean, it's excellent teaching. Excellent teaching. It makes me want to reread and reread the scriptures to see what I've missed in the past. So it's wonderful teaching.
You know, the interesting thing about that is if you're reading the story, you see the words, and it's like, well, okay, you're reading ancient history, okay. But all of a sudden, when this thing comes together, and all of a sudden you realize there's a staging, and the map is right there in the alphabet, but when there's a certain staging that we've not heard of, we just haven't been told. Well, that's part of the obfuscation, that's part of the lies, that's part of the, but Yahweh said he'd do it. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not mad at anybody. It's just like, no, that's what we inherited. We inherited the world. Here it is. Oh, but we just happen to inherit also being the generation of those who can come back to Yahweh's words and realize for what they are and say, okay, thank you very much, Yahweh. We will be your people. Everything Yahweh said, we will hear and we will do. Just like it was said 3 times at Mount Sinai, we're saying it again. Yahweh is our Elohim. Everything he said, we will hear and we will do. Hooray for our side, we win.
I was just thinking about a lot of the stuff, you know, when you read in the Old Testament, the Tanakh, regarding some of this stuff, you know, what has actually already been fulfilled. And it's kind of, you know, some of this stuff seems like, you know, when you consider Acts 2 and the outpouring of the Spirit and some of the things that have already taken place, it almost seems like, you know, a lot of this stuff has already taken place, right? It's already been fulfilled. But when you consider the entire body of text and you look at certain events within the Bible, they repeat themselves. Their stories are kind of retold a little bit differently throughout time, and they build upon it. And each time it's told, I don't know if anybody else has recognized this, but you can see the patterns in the word and how each event, each time the story is told a little bit differently, it builds upon the last time it was told, and there's a more fulfilling within it. And even like, you know, when you read about Abraham and Noah and David, and these are all like types of messiahs, right? They're all, you can see kind of the shadow pictures and the fulfillment of the Messiah. And I see that kind of with the book of Acts, and the fulfilling is, that's part of the story. That's kind of a shadow of what is to come. Yes, there was the outpouring of the Spirit, and people, you know, did prophesy and get born again, if you will, born from above. And there's a great outpouring, I guess you'd say. You know, there's a great movement at that time. And that's just kind of what I see as a shadow of what's to come. There's even going to be more of that, and it's an ongoing process. And the story's going to be even told even in a greater detail and context in the future. Like it's all cyclical within the scriptures, and what we see in Acts is just a bit of what's going to come in the future. When the real outpouring is, you know, when the bodies are resurrected, right?
Let me say this about that real quick, Greg. For those who look at the constellations, the Mazarot, we are at the edge, we're at the cusp, we're at the doorway of what they call the age of Aquarius, where the constellation shifts into the next house, the transition of the progression of the equinoxes. You know, we've been in the house of a certain constellation, what they call the fish, the Pisces, for 2,160 years, and we're right at the edge of Aquarius. Well, aqua, that's water. It's the water pourer. And in the study of the constellations, some say, well, it's about the one who's pouring the water. Some say it's about the urn, and some say it's about the water itself. And whether the water is for good or for evil, maybe both. But why is it that it's all staged according to the Mazarot houses, where at this moment we're right at the edge of something's going to be poured out? Right, what you're talking about. We could even think of this as great trouble. Well, maybe for some. I mean, look at what happened, all the stories through Joshua and Judges and Kings. Every time the people of Israel turned back to Yahweh, bad guys got wiped out. And every time they turned away from Yahweh, bad guys were invigorated. So, you know, it all goes back to that's the fulcrum of the teeter-totter. But if we stand at the place of the pouring out, the outpouring in a greater way than was ever even begun back in the book of Acts, what a great thing for us to try to envision and play into with intention, by design. Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead and finish what you're saying. I just wanted to bring that point up.
No, I mean, I think that is spot on. You know, it's the believers came together as one, and they were ready. And it says, you know, when the day was fully come, you know, this happened, and that is our hope, right? That is what we are looking for, that day to fully come, when all of creation is crying out, calling out, crying out for restoration, for everything to be restored back to paradise, right?
That's what he told us. That's what he said.
You know, when you were talking about guarding, Adam was put to protect and guard the garden. Well, what was in the garden? It's the tree of life, and his words, his letters, those are the words of life. You know, we guard that, and we protect it, and we put up our hedges and try to keep the enemy out, and don't listen to the enemy when he's whispering in our ears, trying to tell us things that are contrary to what Yah told us to do. It's a beautiful thing, beautiful story. Glad to be a part of it.
So Judith there in Australia, hopefully this addresses some of the matter of saying, well, gosh, I don't know why people would want to turn away. Where are they going to find a better channel on TV, you know, to be watching what?
It was really interesting. You said we're talking about remember and the grandeur of Yahweh. It's interesting by sitting down on the Sabbath, we're resurrected into life of the Word, and that's where he places or puts on his robe of majesty with the Sabbath. And yeah, it's a beautiful picture.
It's certainly a reason. If somebody's looking for a reason of why to stop working and sit down on Shabbat, Mark, you had mentioned, I think it was last week, that he meets with us. He promised to meet with us on that day. And what does that mean? Whether we feel his presence or not? I mean, I don't necessarily feel his presence on Shabbat, but I take the day to just stop. Just stop. You know, I mean, yesterday I read some things. I watched some stuff that somebody sent me to look at, and I napped, and I stared at the trees and the clouds, you know.
Yeah.
Listen to the birds singing around and about.
I have two windows, and one window looks out to the town, and the other window looks out to the mountains. And yeah, that's that really just I think of the shofar, and sometimes I blow it to the mountains and that. And yeah, that's really special.
Yeah, I would
Eric.
think that the best window to be open on Shabbat is the one looking to the mountains.
Yes.
Yeah, Paul, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I really feel this message is a sign for us to posture ourselves ready for manifestation. You know, it's you're just drawing things together that we may be equipped, you know, in a posture to know how to live before him in his face. It's just a real place to be living in these days, so we can be postured to do exactly what he says and make a difference in this world, you know, by the way we posture ourselves before him. That's what's on my heart to say, really. Thank you.
You know, just listening to his voice is the posture. It's again, it's not because we're righteous.
No,
You know, we of course we try to do what he said was righteousness, but he said, remember 3 times. Remember, it's not because you're such good people. That's not what's happening. What's happening is when these guys keep doing evil, the repercussions of their evil is going to come on, swallow them up. It's the natural response to their doing evil is that the evildoers will be taken out by their own evil. With the posture of us listening to him and doing righteousness preserves us, because that's where the preservation is. We don't have to be stronger at righteousness than they are at evil. Listen to what he said and do it. It has its effect. All those who don't listen will be swept up by the flood of the evil. He gave us this as a great ark of a life raft, you might say. Just do what he said. Well, anyway, does anybody else want to make a contribution of the to the mind meld here?
No, but I'm gonna have to leave pretty soon because it's Father's Day and I got a whole bunch of family coming over. So it's been a pleasure, guys, being with you again, and I look forward to next week. So have a great Yahweh blessed week, and see you next week.
Can we close out in prayer, Mark?
Yeah, Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for the opportunity of coming together to discuss your word. And it says, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered together, Father, you're there present and there present with us. So we thank you for your presence here, and we thank you for the wisdom that you've given Eric in how to look at the scriptures. And we're all blessed, Father. It says in scripture that we're blessed just by reading it, but we're even more blessed when we study it and try to implement it in our lives. So thank you, Father, and teach us this week to live in such a way that we implement what we've learned today and in our daily lives. Amen.
Amen.
Have a great week.
So,
Thank you, Yahweh.
Thanks, Eric. It was brilliant.
thanks, Eric.
Well, sorry, and I didn't catch your name. You've
Tony.
I'm Tony from South Africa.
Tony in South Africa. Great. Well,